Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we've got another bit of great news right before the release of Cartethyia, and that's of course going to be details on her weapon. And I've had a bit of a preview of all the different stats and effects that this thing provides, and at a baseline, it's one of the strongest weapons in the game, and the other part is that it's kind of only usable on Cartethyia. And knowing that weapons are kind of like one of the biggest investments you can make in this game, you do kind of want a weapon that's either, really, really good on a character, or it's usable on a lot of characters. And this one kind of only fits one part of the bill. And so with that, we've got Defier's Thorn ready to go. Let's go ahead and get right on into it. But before we begin, if you're looking to pick up Cartethyia or her weapon and might purchase some Lunite, you'd probably like to save some cash. LD Shop is a fantastic way of doing that, and I'll show you exactly why. LDshop.gg gives you access to huge discounts on pretty much anything you can buy in a ton of games. But let's click on Woowa for now. The monthly pass? Usually it's $5 dues, but on LD Shop, it'll be much less. What a deal! To claim one of these discounts, just select the item you're looking for and click Top Up to submit your payment. You'll need your Kuro linked account email, password, and username. This might seem a bit off, but remember that LD Shop already works with sensitive account information with their emulator, LD Player, so you can trust them for their services. They also have excellent reviews on Trustpilot. If you created an account with Gmail or Facebook, use the directions in the top-up menu to link your account to an email. After finalizing your payment info, wait a couple of minutes and your items will be on your account. New users can get a 15% discount and an additional 5% using my sponsored link, and first-time top-up bonuses are available as well. That means you can get some big discounts. Spending $80 or more will net you a VIP membership, which can get you a free 30-day Lunite subscription. So try LD Shop today. So first things first, when it comes to this weapon, Defier's Thorn, we're going to read a little bit about it. The surging tides force the crown of... Nobody cares. Let's get into the base stats of this bad boy. It looks great. Very, very, very aquatic and water themed over here. And of course, that fits the aesthetic of Fleur-de-Lis and Cartethyia. So yeah, base stats. It's going to have a whopping 412 base attack and a 72.2% HP main stat. So, you might notice, holy shit, this weapon has almost no attack at all, and that's because, you probably guessed it, ladies and gentlemen, Cartethyia is actually going to be an HP scaling DPS. And the main clue that we have of that when it comes to her HP scaling is, of course, the fact that, A, when she's in her Resonance Liberation, she does something a little bit special. To do her transformation, she's going to reduce her HP to 50% of her maximum. And if she didn't scale off of HP, well, that would basically put her into one-shot range of pretty much every single enemy in the game. And so with this weapon scaling off of HP and it having one of the biggest HP main stats in the game, it's pretty clear that that's where most of her damage is going to be coming from and most of her scaling is coming from. And so with that in mind, this is going to be the fattest HP substat we've ever seen on a weapon. There really aren't any that are comparable, but it's also going to be equipped with the lowest base attack that we've ever seen on a weapon before. I think the only comparable weapons when it comes to base attack in general are going to be Shorekeeper Signature, and of course, the one that we got for none other than Mr. Baranto himself, because Brant scales off of ER. And so that's where, the trade-off is coming for that. So you can see over here, very, very big HP 72.2% stat. And that also means, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think anybody else in the game is even going to be able to use this thing. Just at like a baseline, I don't know any unit in the game that is a sword user and then also benefits from the HP main stat. Unless you plan on like turning somebody into like a walking punching bag for the enemies. Like instead of requesting a training dummy for Kuro, you're like requesting and turning your own character into a training dummy so you can see like the Echo movesets. Yeah, there's pretty much no purpose at all for having this on any unit other than Cartethyia. However, you might potentially change your mind once you see the weapon skill. But before we dive into the weapon skill, we're going to have to talk about some of the specifics when it comes to this main stat breakdown in particular, and that is the fact that it provides no crit on a character who's probably going to want to crit. This is kind of like a simple reality when it comes to this weapon, is that Cartethyia is already going to come with some built-in crit rate across her echoes, because you have Windward Pilgrimage arriving in the game in version 2.4, which is going to be Cartethia's best in slot set, and what this Echo set does is it basically provides 40% arrow damage because Cartethyia is able to apply her own arrow erosion, so she can activate this set completely by herself, and then also 10% crit rate. That is a pretty sizable amount right off the bat. Another thing you're going to want to keep in mind is that with this weapon, you might actually want to run a 4-4-1-1-1 echo set. And so you might be wondering, Saint, what the fuck do you mean by 4-4-1-1-1? And by 4-4-1-1-1, I mean something like, I'm gonna have to, it's just something that nobody ever really does anymore. Let me go find a character who might be able to sample it. So yeah, we've got a critical damage piece over here, right? A 4-4-1-1-1 set would basically consist of using 2 4-cost echoes. I'm in battle? God forbid. So a 4-4-1-1-1 set basically consists of you having a critical damage or rate 4-cost echo, and then another critical rate or damage 4-cost echo. And then you're gonna go ahead and instead of the typical 2-3 costs you would have in every single build, you just put in 3 of them alongside those 4 costs that you have. And essentially, you still end up with 5 fully leveled echoes and all of their different substats. And the only thing that you're missing, right, is the fact that, well, you're missing a good bit of the 3 costs, which can typically have some very, very, very useful main stats like fusion damage bonus. The thing, though, when it comes to Carthethyia, is that Carthethyia actually has a fair amount of damage bonus built into her kit, which we previewed over here and will be linked in either the description or the comments below. She's got built-in damage bonuses like, you know, if the enemy has arrow erosion stacks on them, she'll deal up to 60% increased damage to them. And, you know, built-in amplification, all of that for her team. And if you are using her with Chacona, who is her best in slot support, you're also going to have Chacona coming in with a 24% arrow damage bonus to the entire team as well. And so if you are operating with a weapon like this one that's going to be missing the critical stats in exchange for HP, which is going to be a damage stat for Carthethyia, then, well, it might be better to run that exact 4-4-1-1-1 stat portfolio that we're talking about over here, so that you could get these juicy critical stats on the character. The last bonus of a 4-4-1-1-1 set is the fact that the 1 costs actually give flat HP, and the 3 costs of a set actually give flat attack. And so, in some ways, 4-4-1-1-1 might actually give you more flat HP than a 4-3-3-1-1 because of that additional HP you're getting from slotting in 1 costs. And Fleur-de-Lis is an HP scaler. So, something to keep in mind. And the best part about all of this is, well, when you're farming in version 2.4, you will actually be able to get the new set on 4-4-1-1-1 because the new set is going to drop from Rime-Draped Fleur-de-Lis, who is the weekly boss, as well as this other boss over here that's going to be introduced in the patch. Credits to myself for finding out this information in my video. The last tip that I'll give when it comes to farming the echoes over here is that tacit fields can only drop echoes that you've discovered from your databank. And so if you intentionally decide in version 2.4 to not farm these 2 echoes and only farm these ones and unlock only these ones in your database, if you do farm the tacit field or use your unborn echoes afterwards on this tacit field, you should theoretically only be able to get Capitanius and then all of these 1 costs. Just a tip for when the update launches. You might want to avoid the Pilgrim Shell and the lizard man looking thing. That's just some thoughts on her weapons, or her echoes, if you are going to be pulling this weapon. And of course, if you're running Emerald of Genesis instead, which has built-in crit rate, I think 4-4-1-1-1 on Fleur-de-Lis might still actually be fine as well. You'll just run double crit damage on the 4 costs, because that HP flat main stat on the 1 cost might still just be better, and she still is getting a lot of that built-in arrow damage bonus across her kit. Those are just some notes on the base stats. I know that was long, but I do think it was important, especially knowing that some people might not know how to optimize their farming on day 1. So that's just all the stuff when it comes to the base stats. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the weapon effect. And boy, oh boy, is this a crazy weapon effect. The weapon skill is going to be called a Free Knight's Tarantella. That looks like Tarantula. I don't know why they decided to use this word. It's just, it looks so strange. Let's get into what it actually does. Based off a synchronization rank of 1, this weapon is going to increase your max HP even further by 12% after its insane main stat. Honestly, I feel like it should have gave crit instead. That's just my point of view. I feel like it should have gave like a general attribute damage bonus or crit instead of HP. That probably would have made more sense. And for 15 seconds after casting an intro skill or using a basic attack, all things that Cartethyia is going to want to do, you're going to ignore 8% of the target's defense when dealing damage. And if the target has at least 1 stack of arrow erosion, the target's damage taken is amplified by 20%. So what she essentially has in her kit is a boost to her main's damage scaling, HP, 8% defense ignore, and a 20% damage amplification if the target has arrow erosion on them. And this is the thing. She applies her own arrow erosion stacks. She applies actually up to 5 of them in a regular rotation and 8 of them in an extended, a little bit more complex one. And so Cartethyia is going to be able to maintain uptime on this with absolutely no effort at all. And the main comparable weapon that I can think about when it comes to this is Zani's. And if I'm going to be frankly a little bit honest, this might be slightly weaker than Zani's. Potentially, depending on your point of view of like damage amplification. Because what Zani's does is it gives the same boost to damage scaling, right? Attack for Zani instead of HP. It gives the same 8% defense ignore, but then only gives, or really gives, a Spectral Frazzle damage amp of 50%, which we all know a lot of Zani's kit is considered Spectral Frazzle damage. And so, at a first glance, Cartethyia might seem weaker, but instead, Cartethyia amplifies all of the damage that the target is taking, not just specifically arrow erosion damage. And this is really important because Cartethyia kind of only has arrow erosion as a main damage type on 1 skill in her kit, and that's going to be her plunge attack in her baby form. The other way that she scales with arrow erosion damage is going to be through her big mommy form, where her attacks in big mommy form will actually trigger arrow erosion and cause the number of stacks to go down when she uses certain big hits in her kit, like that one. That would trigger arrow erosion damage and then cause the damage to go down. Cartethyia as a whole doesn't have actually a lot of arrow erosion based damage, and so that's probably why we're not seeing such an arrow erosion focused damage effect on this weapon, and instead a bit more of a general damage amplification. That's going to be that when it comes to the weapon effect. You can probably tell you do have to read a little bit into Cartethyia's kit and know all of her different damage types to see whether or not, you know, what the strength of this overall weapon is. But the fact that it has 20% general damage amp to pretty much every single damage type, and I guess technically every single attribute, I think it's going to be pretty solid. I think it's going to be pretty great on her, but unfortunately, based off the fact that it's doing something as crazy as increasing HP when there's no units in the game other than Baija and Shorekeeper, where their damage scales off of HP, and those two are supports and they're also Rectifier users, this weapon is one that might be sitting on the shelf when it comes to being used with other units. I don't think there is a single unit in the game that has any reason to use this. The only one that I could think maybe has like a half second of use case would be Arrow Rover if they had somebody else on the team applying erosion, but Arrow Rover would be using their signature weapon instead, Blood Pack's Pledge. They would be using this to support Cartethyia on the team. So yeah, I do think that overall, when it comes to this weapon, I think your main build is going to be 4-4-1-1-1. You're going to run a crit rate as well as a crit damage forecast. You're going to make sure to get that on the new Windward Pilgrimage set, and that's going to give you probably a juicy 34.3% crit rate just from the main stats alone. And that's what you're going to do to make up for the lack of crit stats in both the base stats as well as the weapon effect. And you're probably just not going to be using this weapon on anybody else. When it comes to alternative weapons, I think that there are a few ones at a baseline that you might want to think about. Emerald of Genesis is going to be the #1 choice for pretty much a simple reason. While she isn't really going to scale with the attack bonus that we're seeing over here, Cartethyia is still going to scale with the ER. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? ER is a really good stat to have on your weapon, especially if that weapon gives crit as well, because this is ER that you're probably not going to need to have on your echo rolls. And when a DPS character like Carthethyia typically wants around 120%, this means with one ER substat or an R3 Emerald of Genesis, you don't need any ER subs at all. If it's R1, you'll need 1. If it's R3, you'll need 0. And if it's R2, you might just need 0 as well, because 116 might be perfectly fine for her. And so this is still, even if she's not gaining a benefit from the attack buff, this is still a fine alternative because it lets you have, first and foremost, a nice buff from crit, as well as you don't really need ER on your build. The next thing that you'll probably want to keep in mind is, of course, Red Spring, because Carthethyia actually deals a lot of basic attack damage. And while she isn't going to gain that much benefit at all from the attack increase over here, Carthethyia is going to gain a pretty significant benefit from the 30% basic attack damage bonus that we're going to have coming from the weapon, because Carthethyia and Fleur-de-Lis both actually deal a significant amount of basic attack damage throughout their kit. And so this is probably actually going to be the best option overall following Carthethia's signature. But of course, you're going to be lacking the ER subs, but you will have the crit rate to help make up for it. The last option is Blazing Brilliance, but I'm going to be honest, this is going to suck for one specific reason. Carthethyia deals no resonant skill damage. Like, she actually doesn't deal resonant skill damage. I think she might have it on one ability, but one thing that she does in her kit is she's a little bit like Camellia. She actually converts her resonant skill damage to basic attack damage. That's something to keep in mind as you're going through and looking at your weapon choices. Blazing Brilliance is something that buffs resonant skill damage, and it effectively is just a stat stick for her. And that actually makes Emerald of Genesis, with its energy regen weapon effect, it's actually better than Chang-Li's signature in this situation. Last option is Unflickering Valor. I'm gonna be real. This is actually, it's not terrible. And you might be wondering, how could you say that? Well, Unflickering Valor gives low attack, that's for certain, but Fleur-de-Lis is not going to scale off of attack anyways. And so you're really going to get a shit ton of ER, which you're not going to need, but then you'll get 8% crit rate, and then up to a 48% boost to basic attack damage. So, I mean, it's functionally, if you don't need the crit, or if you're fine with having only 1/3 the crit of other weapons, the low base attack doesn't matter. You will have too much ER, but 48% basic attack damage bonuses, 48% basic attack. I mean, yeah, it's definitely not an awful idea. When it comes to other weapons, well, we're just gonna have to search and see what has an HP scaling stat over here. Maybe Lumen Gloss. Yeah, that gives a basic attack damage bonus. What does Guardian Sword do? It gives an HP secondary stat. I guess you could give Carthethyia a 3-star weapon too, but I don't think the HP is enough to offset Emerald of Genesis's crit. Yeah, this gives HP as its second substat type. I'm pretty sure the crit rate on an Emerald of Genesis is going to be better, so please don't give her that if you have EOG. Please don't. But yeah, you can't consider that if you're looking for the premier, like, broke boy option. That's definitely something you can do. Those are all the different weapons. Those are all the different alternatives. As you can see, Cartethyia doesn't have, she kind of has like a lot of acceptable ones. A lot of ones that will work for her because she will want to crit still, but there are still going to be some very consistent top tier performers with her weapon being at the top. Then you'll have Camellias, then you'll have Brants, and then you'll have like EOG, and it depends on which stat you need. But EOG, despite not having a good home for its attack scaling passive, it is going to have a good home for its crit as well as its ER. And ER is something that every DPS needs. That's going to be our overview of it. Now we've got one last thing left, and that's of course going to be the weapon materials. And this is just going to be consistent for like every single weapon we've had. It's going to level up with the same exact sword mats we've had since 1.0 of the game. Very lovely. And then it's also going to have level ups with Howler cores. You should be able to have all of these mats super easily. I think we have very fine access to pretty much everything you're going to want. No big deal. It is what it is. When it comes to this weapon, I would just do a couple of things. I would first and foremost, see how Fleur-de-Lis performs as you're building her with an Emerald of Genesis, which you probably should have by now. And then if you decide you want more damage, go for it. Because with the builds that you're going to be running, the 4-4-1-1-1s, all of that, you might want to decide a little bit earlier before you invest how much crit you're getting and what kind of builds you're going to be running. And with this weapon providing no crit at all, it's pretty fair to say you're going to want to run 1 crit rate and 1 crit damage at a minimum. But it's not like re-rolling 1 echo, operating like that way, doing some testing is, that crazy of an expenditure. when you're going up to 65, 67, 68 limited pulls to pull a weapon like this. But I will say for certain, if you do pull Fleur-de-Lis's weapon, she is going to be very strong with it. Let me know what you all think. Peace.